Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money.
Why do you not even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes.
Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that.
As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil.
Anyone then who knows the good how to do and doesn't do it sins.
Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. Just want to say a big thank you to all the grade 10 guys who read the passage for this week. That passage was James 4, verse 13 to 17, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. The first issue I have after reading this passage is I kind of struggle to see what the problem is, right? It's kind of like I read this and you go, oh, okay, I don't really get what he's trying to say here. And the fact that I don't realize what the problem is kind of the problem in itself, right? When I read the problem and I can't see it, it's like, oh, maybe the problem has something to do with me then, because I can't pick up the problem myself. And the problem in this passage is actually a forgetting of God, right? We forget God and we don't take him into account when we create plans, and we kind of forget to acknowledge he even exists. And why is this bad? It may seem pretty obvious at first, but actually I want to talk about three main reasons why the forgetting of God is a big problem. So first of all, the forgetting of God is the opposite of glorifying him. Well, the word glory, right, to start this section off, is actually another word for weight, right? We add weight to certain people. And this doesn't mean in terms of a physical weight like kilograms or pounds or something like that, but it means a kind of ability to comprehend the person, right? So when I think of people, I give a particular weight to them in my head, right? Like the way I consider a 3-year-old child is different to the way I consider Cyril Ramaphosa. I'm like, wow, that guy is much more important at this particular time and in this particular moment than that 3-year-old baby. It has a lot more power. And when we forget people, actually we're taking away that weight in our minds, right? Because we're not even considering them. It's even less weight than we would give to a 3-year-old baby, right? Because at least we consider the baby. But when we forget God, we actually don't give any weight to him, which means that we're completely doing the opposite of glorifying him. Now, this is not just a big issue for us, but it was a big issue in the Old Testament. And God actually addresses this issue through Psalm 9, verse 17 and 18, where it speaks about those who forget God will be forgotten by God, and those who remember God will be remembered by him. Now, being forgotten like God is a pretty big thing, right? It's quintessentially it's hell, right? Being forgotten by God is actually to be removed from his presence, and that's not a good thing. Now, the second big issue is that we are made to reflect God, but we're not made to be God. When we forget God, we actually start to try to be like him, right? Now, this is done in the sense that we act like we know everything, when in reality only God does. Now, what does this do? When we pretend to know everything, actually it creates something in us which is pretty terrible, and we all know this feeling, and that feeling is worry, right? Because actually only God knows everything, and deep down in our souls we do know that we don't know everything. So when we make plans and they go right, and we kind of thinking in this frame of that we know everything, then we feel really superior. But then suddenly when they go wrong, we go from here right down to here, because we suddenly start to feel really inferior, and it's like, man, I was meant to know everything, but I don't. What am I meant to do? And actually this creates a huge worry within us. Now, this passage is actually calling us back into perspective. It's trying to say, hey, wait, remember, you aren't God. You aren't meant to know everything. And what it's actually saying is that if you forget God, if you forget who God is and what he does, you actually forget who you are and what you're meant to do, right? If you forget what God is and what he does, you actually forget what you're meant to do. Now, the reason I've said that twice is because it's extremely important, right? We need to remember who we are, and we need to remember who God is. The third and final point is this is not an issue of wording. I think that sometimes when I read this, I can kind of think, man, that means in every single sentence I say, I need to say in front of it, if God wills, right? If I say, oh, I'm going to the shop, I actually need to say, if God wills, I'll go to the shop. Now, this actually isn't an issue of wording. What James isn't trying to do is make us change our jargon, but actually what he's trying to do is to say that we need to live in light of the grace of God, who gives us every breath, as it says in the James passage. It's the reason we live, and not in the glimmer or the mist or the thing that fades very quickly of ourselves. We need to live in light of the glory of God and not in the glimmer of ourselves. Now, this grace actually pulls us from pride, but it doesn't just pull us from pride, but it actually pushes us into peace. It ultimately gives us peace. Now, to end off, I think that this is super important because we can hear the first point. It's like, man, I could be forgotten by God, and that's really scary, right? But I want to tell you that actually on the cross, when Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? That word forsaken can actually also be translated forgotten, right? And in that moment on the cross, Jesus was forgotten so that we wouldn't have to be. So that when we accept Jesus, all our sins in forgetting God and dishonoring him and taking away glory from him are actually forgiven, because actually Jesus was forgotten so that we wouldn't have to be. Thanks guys for listening, and keen to see you at Gravity this week. I hope your small group discussions go well.